Yo, what is up guys? Del Boy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like button, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So Dana White potentially has just dunked on boxing once again. Dana White has announced the return of Khabib, and he will be fighting on October 24th against Justin Gaethje. That fight in the MMA world is highly anticipated, and it will do very well at the box office. Now, this fight is on the same date as Leo Santa Cruz versus Gervonta Davis. That fight is also scheduled for the 24th of October. Now, this announcement from Dana White is bad news for Al Heyman and the PBC, because ultimately, Khabib Nurmagomedov right now is one of the biggest stars in combat sports, period. You know, in the MMA world, outside of Conor McGregor, is he the biggest star in the UFC, in MMA? More than likely. And he's now a bona fide pay-per-view attraction. Even Justin Gaethje, his last fight with Tony Ferguson, I believe it did something like 700,000 pay-per-view buys. And combine that with a name like Khabib Nurmagomedov, this pay-per-view is going to do very well and will more than likely affect the buy rate on Tank Davis versus Leo Santa Cruz. Bear in mind, Tank Davis and Leo Santa Cruz, yes, they have fan bases, but they've never been on pay-per-view before. They've never headlined a pay-per-view. So we've got no idea how popular these guys even are. I don't really anticipate that pay-per-view doing all that well, but with this announcement, I think it's going to be even worse, to be honest. So my prediction is this, or not a prediction, but I think it's very likely. I think it's very likely that either Tank Davis or Leo Santa Cruz picks up an injury in the build-up to this fight. So it's got to be rescheduled later on in the year in order for these guys to have a date where they're not competing with such a big event, because Khabib versus Gaethje is a big fight in the MMA world, and there are crossover fight fans who watch both boxing and MMA, and I'm sure most of these crossover fans will be buying the Khabib pay-per-view. It's a much higher level fight, it's a much more high profile fight, and yeah, in my opinion, this has to have some effect on the Tank Davis versus Leo Santa Cruz buy rate if they go ahead. So yeah, I really wouldn't be surprised if somebody pulls out injured in the lead up to this fight, just so they can get a new date and start again basically. But that's just my opinion. Anyway, a little MMA talk. I have been getting into the UFC a little bit more during the lockdown. It's actually kind of interested me, to be honest. I've enjoyed what I've seen. And Khabib versus Gaethje is a fight I really want to see. It's the fight to make it lightweight. Justin Gaethje is the number one contender, without a doubt, and stylistically it's an interesting fight, you know? Justin Gaethje, as we know, he's a power puncher, he's very aggressive, he's fun to watch, but also, interestingly, the guy is actually a very good wrestler. He's not really shown that in the UFC, to be honest, in terms of takedowns and things like that, but he does have that wrestling background in his arsenal, and maybe he can try and utilise that against Khabib and actually try to surprise him. You never know. Maybe he could out-wrestle the wrestler. I don't really see that happening, but it's an interesting dynamic. And one thing about Gaethje, he actually has pretty good takedown defense as well. So, listen, Gaethje is definitely a live contender. You don't want to get hit by this guy because the guy does genuinely carry knockout power. And in my opinion, his boxing in that Tony Ferguson fight was the best I've ever seen it. He was calm, he was composed, he was measured. And I think this is potentially a tough fight for Khabib. So I'm really intrigued about this fight. Obviously, I'm backing Khabib. You know, the guy's an absolute phenom of a fighter. His wrestling is just unreal. The mauling, the pressure, the pace he sets, just unrivaled. But it's a really good fight between Khabib and Justin Gaethje. It really is. And the UFC have also announced Daniel Cormier versus Stipe Miocic 3. That's another really good fight. And Israel Adesanya against Paulo Costa. So they're really going hard right now, the UFC. They really are. And they have to be commended for that. And as a fight fan, as a casual MMA fan, I've actually really been enjoying it, to be honest. And again, my bread and butter is always boxing. My passion will always be boxing, but I've certainly got a newfound respect for MMA, you know, just by watching it a lot during the lockdown, you know, and I am a lot more interested now than I was before the lockdown. So I will certainly be tuning in a lot more in the future. But there we go. Is Tank Davis versus Leo Santa Cruz now at threat due to Dana White's recent announcement, or will they soldier ahead and actually compete with the UFC with their pay-per-view. Like I said, me personally, I think it will affect their numbers, and this fight to begin with, basically was an experiment to see how popular Tank Davis is. That's really what the goal is on this fight. They're going to try and gauge how popular Tank Davis is right now to see whether he's a viable pay-per-view star. And competing against this event isn't going to do him any favours whatsoever. But there we go. Share your thoughts below. Peace.